So there's no restriction on age. For time post-stroke, we are looking for people that are more than 6 months after their stroke, but less than 8 years. The other criteria, so it's really for people who can walk, but would like to walk better.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it in a few ways based on kind of what people tell me. The kind of common things they tell me are, I can do X, but I really want to do Y. So they really have a clear goal, and that's motivating them to kind of sign up. The other thing that sometimes people will say is that something's happened. So they might have had a fall. And they say, look, I had a fall. I just feel like it's really set me back, and I want to have a boost to try and get back to where I was.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to episode 257 of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. My guest today is Dr. Kate Scrivener, Senior Lecturer in Physiotherapy in the Department of Health Sciences from Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. Kate is conducting a study specifically designed to see if it is possible to improve the walking ability of stroke survivors who are at least 6 months post-stroke, but no more than 8 years post-stroke, are currently walking but have some walking deficits. The study is being conducted in 2 locations, including Sydney and Melbourne, and Kate is looking for volunteers that may be interested in participating who are based in Melbourne to sign up and be a part of the study. The Sydney group of volunteers has already been filled, and the study will commence on the first week of July 2023, while the Melbourne group will hopefully be recruited and ready to participate in the study by August 2023. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes to get all the links to more information on the study and to download the PDF flyer with further information. If you are in a country outside of Australia, this conversation may also be interesting for you if you want to improve walking after a stroke and you're curious about new ways and other ways to go about it. Kate Scrivener, welcome to the podcast.
Bill, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. Tell me a little bit about your background and what you do and how you managed to be in the situation where we're chatting today.
So I'm a physio by background, Bill, and I've worked particularly in stroke rehab in various forms for almost 20 years. I'm from Sydney in Australia, and now my primary role is really an academic role at Macquarie University, where I teach physiotherapists about neurological rehab and also research, in particular in stroke rehabilitation.
How did you get to be involved specifically with physiotherapy in the stroke field?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I have some family connection to stroke, so I wonder if that's it. But I set out, as many physiotherapists do, to, work with healthy, sporting people. And then, as you know, in my experience at university, actually found that it was much more interesting and much more rewarding to help people on their recovery journey after stroke.
Yeah.
And that's where I landed ever since.
The really cool part of physiotherapy is you always hear about people working in sports therapy or, for the biggest football team or for the most, famous tennis star or whomever. And it makes sense that that's kind of an area that attracts a lot of people's interest at the beginning. But it's a very small niche because there are only a limited number of football teams, and then there are also only a limited number of superstars that you can get lucky enough to work with.
Yeah.
So how did your early career unfold? Where did you find yourself getting your experience from?
So really, I worked within the public hospital sector, and just did my very best, because if anyone knows the public hospital sector, they like to give you varied experience, which is great. But I knew I loved stroke rehab pretty early. So I did my very best to get as much experience as I could in stroke rehab, until I was able to kind of get a job that was completely full-time in stroke rehab, which was fantastic.
So what are some of the differences between working with, we'll call them non-stroke people and stroke people? I know there's heaps, but what stands out as being some of the differences, I suppose, in the challenges working in that space?
Oh, Bill, you would know this more than I do. I think it's just such a privileged time to work with someone, because, I can't even imagine what it feels like to be just living your life and then in an instant have something pretty bad happen. And when most of my stroke experience is at a hospital in Sydney called Bankstown Hospital that has a comprehensive stroke unit, so acute right through to rehab. And so you'd meet people the day of or the day after their stroke and understand the impact of it on their life, but then, have the privilege of working with them or alongside them to build their recovery. And yeah, I just feel like it's an area, very rewarding area of physio, because you can have such an impact and you can really help people on that journey. Sometimes, Bill, don't quote me on this, but when you're working with people that are already healthy and they have, something that's sore or something, it just doesn't, for me, it just doesn't have the same meaning.
It doesn't have the same meaning for people who are healthy as well. So as somebody who was a very normally kind of situated in the world of physical experience, I didn't really take a lot of satisfaction in going to the gym, running. Although the outcome of playing soccer, for example, and all that was fun because I got to hang out with people, I actually never realized how important it was to be able to do those things without thinking twice about them. And then I could say I took it for granted, which is pretty common and fair. And then you go about life, and then all of a sudden that's taken away from you. And all you wish is, can I get back to what I was like before? Or if only everything was like it was before. And that isn't constructive. But then the goal of getting up and walking and the win of recovering your ability to move independently is a massive achievement. It's a massive accomplishment and something that changes completely the way that you experience your physical body and the way that you experience how you identify in the world that you were raised in and that you've spent the majority of your years in. And when you have such a big contrast of this is what life was like for 37 years and now this is what it's like going on from there, it's a really difficult thing for some people to come to terms with. And what we often hope for is that there's going to be an unlimited, never-ending supply of occupational therapy, physiotherapy, physical therapy, any kind of therapy that's going to get us where we want, but it often doesn't come. How much access do you have to the patients that you are introduced to when you're in hospital with them? And then how does that relationship evolve after a few weeks or months, and their recovery is sort of starting to evolve into the next phase?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think you're so right about walking being tied to people's identity too. It really, people really almost always tell me they want to walk again. And when they do, it's like, they've really jumped over a huge hurdle to finding some of themselves again. Yeah, so I think what's interesting is I worked in the public hospital system, but now, or in the last few years, if I work at all, it's in the community or in the longer term after stroke. And my interest has really turned to that group because I think it's what your question was hinting at, Bill, that we spend a lot of time with people generally when they're in hospital. Some people will, it's a bit variable what you have access to when you leave hospital, but most people will have access to something in the weeks or months after leaving hospital. But then what people have access to ongoing in the longer term after stroke, in Australia anyway, is highly variable. Varies by age, varies by what, sector of funding you can go into, varies by postcode and what your local, what's in your local community. So there is, huge variability. And I think the honest answer is some people, when they're months or more after their stroke, have access to almost nothing, if not nothing.
Yeah. And you mentioned the age being a variable. In what ages do you see the support being reduced? It's my experience that in the older ages, there seems to be a less of an opportunity for somebody to access physio occupational types of therapies. Is that correct in what you see? And do you have some sort of a understanding as to why that is, why it is that people who are of an older age get less, what's the word, support or services, where in my mind it seems like they should be at a top of the priority list and get more, but it's not the case.
It's definitely, as an overall picture, that's definitely my experience too. And if we look at support available in Australia, our disability support is for people who are 65 or younger when they have their stroke. But as we all know, I'm sure many people are over 65 when they have their stroke, which in Australia puts you in the aged care sector. Look, that is changing, but historically has not been very goal or participation driven. It's been very minimalistic in terms of actually achieving what the older person wants to achieve. I hope it changes. I think the Aged Care Royal Commission has suggested some changes to that.
Right.
But either way, we still have a system that's different depending on how old you are, which I think is not great for a condition like stroke, which really does span the age brackets. I don't think we should have different systems, different pockets of funding, depending on how old you are when you have your stroke.
Well, it's a form of discrimination. I mean, it's probably the most obvious form of discrimination where people that experience a disability or an acquired brain injury or something of a serious nature after a certain age, we'll call it after 65, at least in Australia. And I see it around the world anyway, because I interview a lot of people from around the world. But in Australia, because we're both here, it seems to be discriminatory, and it's so plain and so obvious, yet there is nobody really paying attention to it. We're all going to be, hopefully, older than 65 at some point in our life. And that means that the people who are discriminating against the older people are creating a system that's going to be discriminating against themselves when they get older. And I just see it as completely bonkers.
Well, look, I'm pretty passionate about it. I actually wrote an article about this in the Medical Journal of Australia recently, and the Physio Association picked it up, which was great. I don't know if I'm quite on that line. Like, I'm hopeful that older people will get better funding in this space. It does still bother me that it's different. And I think it makes a complex system, and a system that's pretty hard for people to understand and navigate. But but there's probably I think the quick solution is helping to fix the aged care funding. In the long term, wouldn't it be nice if there was one source of funding to meet people's needs?
Yeah, seems like the system's fragmented, and as a result of that,
Fragmented, yeah.
people can easily fall into the cracks, and therefore it's somebody else's problem in another department and not ours. And I imagine that aged care department is probably screaming out for funding or more funding or better funding, and they would be constantly going through the process of trying to advocate for their community or the people that they're allocated to care for, and they would be struggling. But it's great that, and I never knew about that fact, that there is some work being done to potentially create awareness in that space. Now, I am going to remind you now, so that at the end of this interview, we get the link to that particular article that you wrote, so that we can share that with the people who are listening. Most people who are listening might be interested in reading your perspective, and that'd be good if it gets a little bit of extra traction.
No problem.
So in your space as a lecturer, is a neurological physiotherapist, is that different from a physiotherapist? Is that another kind of part of physiotherapy? Is it additional skills, knowledge that you require to get into that space?
Look, there are kind of levels to qualification. So every physiotherapist who graduates university will be trained in neurological physiotherapy and trained to work with people after stroke. It's part of the core curriculum for their degree. But then after you finish that, you can go on and do further study to specialize in neurological physiotherapy. And there's a few pathways, in order to do that, in order to gain kind of extra qualifications. I personally went down the research pathway. So started my PhD and, have continued on to research within stroke.
Yeah. Tell me about some of the research projects that you've done to date.
Yeah, so I guess my interest in walking after stroke started in my PhD. So in my PhD, we looked at recovery of walking in a big group of 200 stroke survivors to see how many recovered walking, and were there any ways we could predict who would recover their walking. I also have a strong interest in intensity or in high dose motor training after stroke. So again, that started in my PhD, but has kind of flowed through my career. And, I've done research in technology to try and boost intensity, just doing, just doing really good motor training, but doing enough of it. And now my research probably sits more in the community, in terms of improving walking, preventing falls, improving life in the longer term after stroke.
It seems like an awesome space, improving walking and reducing falls. Falls tend to be a big setback for some stroke survivors. I know a couple that have had some falls and as a result broken limbs, and then it seems to have put their recovery back a number of years, and really challenged their mental health space around their ability to become more active, especially if they're older, and their ability to get back to life or overcome the deficits from stroke. What is the hope? So what's the hope of this particular study that you're doing at the moment? What are you hoping to find, and how do they work? I've got no idea how these research programs work. So as soon as you reached out and said, can you promote a research project that we're going to talk about in a little bit, because you're looking for people to participate, I don't really understand how the process of it. So where it starts from, what happens in the middle, and then what happens in the end, and then what might happen after that. Can you give me a bit of a rundown?
Yeah. What a great question. It's not easy. It's pretty complex, the whole thing. So typically it starts from an idea, and an idea that's kind of often develops over time and over clinical experience as well as other research. And if we talk about high walk, the idea was, could we think differently about how therapy was accessed in the longer term after stroke? Because we just talked about this. Sometimes it's very hard to access it all. Where it is accessed, it's often long and slow. You might see someone once a week, on an ongoing basis. So we kind of wondered, would stroke survivors prefer doing a short, sharp kind of burst of training, allowing them to focus on it for a few weeks, but then get on with their life for a while? And would that boost of training boost them enough that it would be worthwhile, and allow them some time, at that improved level of function? So we kind of came up with an idea, but then you have to prove that your idea kind of works in reality, and that stroke survivors actually think it's a good idea, because there's no point sitting in the university with your idea, but it's not what people want to do. So then we did, I guess, what you'd call a proof of concept study, where we tried it in a very small group of stroke survivors, only 5, and we just saw, could they do it and what did they think of it? And perhaps the good news was they really liked it. They attended, so it's a 45-hour program in 3 weeks. And when we tested it, they attended about 90% of the sessions.
Wow.
And had a really good rate of practice or of exercise within the sessions. So that bit went pretty well. So then we thought, well, this seems like a good idea. Let's run a trial of it. That costs money. So you then need to apply for money to do that. And we were very lucky that the Stroke Foundation awarded us a grant to do this research. So we're at the point now where we're looking at high walk in a group of 50 stroke survivors, and we proved it in a small group. We now need to take it out to a bigger group and see whether that holds true, and whether it really looks like in that group there could be a benefit for people's walking. And if there is a benefit, can we get an idea of how long that benefit will last for after the program? And that's where we are now.
Right here. Okay.
Right
That's awesome.
here.
So how do you go about choosing the stroke survivors to participate? Is there some criteria that they have to meet? For example, how soon after the acute phase do they qualify? And then are there any restrictions on age at the moment? Is it an open thing? Tell me a little bit about the participants.
Yeah. Again, what a good question. So there's no restriction on age. For time post-stroke, we are looking for people that are more than 6 months after their stroke, but less than 8 years. And we're trying to, the Stroke Foundation actually funded our research because it was in the longer term. So I think full credit to them for shifting the focus to the longer term, which is why there's that 6-month minimum. And 8 years was really just a number to try and narrow our group down a bit. And that's where research and real life differs a bit, because I think in real life, the program could be applicable no matter the years post-stroke. But for research, you need a bit of a narrower group, at least the first time you kind of research something.
And then Go ahead.
Yeah, the other criteria. So it's really for people who can walk but would like to walk better.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it in a few ways based on kind of what people tell me. The kind of common things they tell me are, I can do X, but I really want to do Y. So they really have a clear goal, and that's motivating them to kind of sign up. The other thing that sometimes people will say is that something's happened. So they might have had a fall. And they say, look, I had a fall. I just feel like it's really set me back, and I want to have a boost to try and get back to where I was.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
So probably that's the 2 groups of people that are contacting us and expressing an interest in the program.
Right. So I recall being in outpatient therapy to get my walking a little bit more better, a little more refined after the initial month in occupational therapy and physical therapy in the Royal Melbourne Rehabilitation Clinic at out there near Parkville. And one of the awesome questions that I got asked was, what do I want to achieve about my walking, etc.? And I said I wanted to be able to run, and not to run marathons, although there's some crazy stroke survivors who are doing marathons and ultra marathons, and congratulations to them. I wanted to run across the road in case there was a car coming. That was it.
Yeah.
I can't run anymore in the way that I used to when I was playing soccer, as an amateur soccer player, because the leg response and it knowing where it is on the ground and all the stuff that goes with being that physical, the sudden shifting and moving, is probably not conducive anymore to my abilities. I can't be that physical with my body, but I definitely can run across the road and get away from a car, or, run 2 or 3 or 4 houses down the road, and not be too concerned about falling or tripping. On a treadmill, I can run longer because there's no variables and it's consistent and everything kind of just flows. And if you put the treadmill on a slow pace, you can get into a good rhythm. And even though it feels weird on my left side, it's still relatively doable. But running for 5 minutes on the road in Melbourne on a footpath where there might be a tree root that's cracked the pavement or etc., puts too many variables in it, so that I have to focus and notice the ground more than focus on my rhythm and running. So it was awesome when they said to me, what do you want to be able to achieve? And I like that aspect of your study, is that it gets to kind of personalize it without really personalizing it. You aren't making a specific program for everybody, but you're asking them, and that feels like it's a personalized program specifically for them. Does that make sense?
That's the plan. Yeah, 100%. That's the plan. And in fact, I actually really like working in the longer term and in the community now for that exact reason, that people, when you're in hospital immediately after your stroke, it's life-shattering and you're just getting on your feet again. Whereas down the road, there will often be a clear thing that you just want to get better at doing, or that's limiting your life. And you can see how if you could do that, your overall life would get better. And I think that's really cool. And as physiotherapists, we have to ask that question, and we have to listen to people in terms of what would, be meaningful for their lives, I think.
Yeah, rather than you're putting your perspective on them and overlaying your supposed thoughts of what's best for that person. It's probably never going to be right, because you're not that person. You don't know what their life is like. One of the things I also picked up on that I liked about what you said is we've got in episode 250, I did an interview with Dr. Amir Hadani, and he's an hyperbaric oxygen therapy researcher. And he's talking about doing what you said, high dose hyperbaric oxygen therapy over a month, I think it was, or maybe it was over 60 days. But what was really interesting was the amount of hours per day.
Yeah.
And normally I would say, well, a stroke survivor may not be able to do hours and hours per day because there's a fatigue issue and things like that. Now, I'm not sure if it's anecdotal or whether or not your study of 5 people who you did the pilot on got you this type of feedback, but I was wondering whether or not you guys noticed a difficulty with overcoming fatigue at the beginning of the program, and then sort of a lack, and then a ability to deal with fatigue better as time progressed, because I know that exercise is amazing for the brain and it helps to create new neural pathways. It helps to create serotonin and dopamine and all these amazing neuroprocesses. What did you notice the patients were like physically before and after their stroke? Hopefully you obviously noticed that they're walking differently or more confident about their walking. What else?
Yeah, the 5 people were pretty remarkable, and they were, obviously very motivated people to try it. So they got through actually with very little reports of fatigue and really good success. But that's a chosen group of 5. We are now broadening it out, and that's something that we are really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
We are not sure that the whole group that does the high walk program will be able to attend every day or to do the 3 hours a day. And that's one of the things we'll measure, because we're not sure what the exact right dose is.
Mm-hmm.
The right dose, the right duration for people after stroke. So one of the biggest things is to know what they can do. And we also want to know what impact that has on the rest of their life. So if they're coming to the program 3 hours a day, what is their kind of activity or participation in the rest of the hours of the day look like? So that's, some of the really interesting things we'll gain from this study. I guess we think, well, I don't know, you could probably do more than 3 hours, but we think 3 hours is a pretty big amount.
Huge.
And so we'll learn in this round of the research what it actually, what actually is realistic and perhaps what it should be, which then hopefully if we get to go on to do more research in this space, we'll use that information to refine the program. I think that's a really interesting idea about whether it actually helps build resilience or helps them to feel less fatigued at the end of the program. We're about to find out.
I imagine it would. My personal experience and the experience from some of the other stroke survivors who I've interviewed on the podcast is that at the beginning, especially for me, we'll say maybe around the 12-month mark, where I was probably starting to be the most active that I had been in the previous 12 months after, which was just before the brain surgery. I noticed myself going for a bike ride and then say the bike ride was a gentle, mostly flat surface. And then that might last an hour or 2 because I was taking my time. And then the rest of the day would be completely wiped out.
Mm.
And the rest of the afternoon would be on the couch watching TV, doing nothing and not participating in the day in any other way, so that I could just be okay for the evening. Usually that bike ride was happening on a Saturday. So I could be all right for the evening if we had dinner to go to or catch up with some friends or something. And then the next day would be a really slow start to the day as well. It seemed to have a residual impact where I needed almost 24 hours to recover and feel better, and another sleep, in between.
Yeah.
As time went on, that decreased. So my need to sit down and recover went from I need to be on the couch for the next 8 hours, to slowly, I started to creep it back. And now I can say that if I go for a bike ride, perhaps I do need to, just like anyone who's had a massive bike ride, and for me, massive is not what, a crazy mammal would ride. I wouldn't be doing 100 kilometers a day. I'd be like if I'm doing 20. For me, that would be massive. But that started to decrease. And over time, my recovery needed to be an hour or two. Now, my left side deficits were more pronounced and more obvious to me, but there was this weird thing that was happening. So my deficits were more, but my walking wasn't worse. It felt stranger and worse, but it didn't look stranger and worse on the outside. So there was this residual, there was this additional fatigue physically of just standard muscle fatigue, but the neurological fatigue had decreased. And it seemed to be that I was now dealing with physical fatigue, muscle aches and pains, rather than the neurological fatigue and the impact that had on walking. So the neurological pathways were getting less strained, I suppose, or they were getting better, stronger, something, perhaps the other side of it. They were improving in their ability to manage the load of pedaling and holding on with my left side, and then what that did to the brain. And then I wasn't specifically so unable to use my cognition as I was at the beginning, where my cognition would also be the thing that I had to heal and recover and let rest, not just my physical part. So I imagine, because I've got like a window into the future, and I know your participants, I imagine that some of them at least might notice something like that, and I hope they do, because that's going to be an amazing thing to be able to iterate to somebody in a conversation, and to specifically know, hey, I know it's hard and it sucks and you hate it right now for some people. But if you do this, you'll notice these types of improvements. That's what other people have reported with the physical activity.
Yeah, and we've actually started in Sydney this week, so it's been a great week to meet the group of stroke survivors who are participating in Sydney and who've come in for their assessments. And obviously they're selecting to participate, but they're all so open to the idea of the 3-week, 45-hour program and just giving it a go. Some are very confident they'll be able to do it and, have access to some pretty intensive therapy now or in the past. Some are not sure, but are so committed to giving it a go. And, we're very grateful for that, because that really helps us to answer this question within the research.
I know with research and funding for research, there are very strict parameters in which you can operate, and I get it. I'm wondering though, some of the stroke survivors that I've met will go through the process of giving themselves a timeline and deadline and be overconfident in their abilities, and then they won't meet that deadline or hit that particular personal goal, and it'll affect them negatively psychologically and emotionally. Is there any part of your study that kind of enables you to support people after the study or the project ends, if they kind of take a little bit of a downturn emotionally or physically, or actually psychologically as well?
Oh, Bill, I hope that won't happen. So anyone who's in the program, we will follow them up for 6 months.
That's what I mean.
And for the people who are in, so there are 2 groups because it's a trial. There's the group that will participate in the High Walk program, and there is a control group or a group that will do their usual activities. For the group that participate in the program, I guess we're at that stage where we're not expecting anything negative to happen, but obviously if it does, or if they're demotivated, we will deal with that within the parameters kind of that we can in the research. Probably the trickiest part is most people are signing up because they really, they're keen to try this kind of program. And if they are allocated to the control group, they're a little bit disappointed. I will say, we are not stopping anyone doing any of their usual exercise or therapies. And at the end of the 6 months, we do offer that group kind of access to the program. So it's only one session, but we'll still go through the program with them and give them some resources to try that program at home if they wish to. So we are just very clear to people if they are going to participate that there is a 50-50 chance of trying the program or of not.
I like it. Okay. Now, the reason I ask is because I've just experienced the being able to sort of facilitate people through stroke recovery as a stroke recovery coach, for example. And then some of the people come to me after that stage where they thought they were further along in their recovery, and then they found they weren't, and they just took a negative view to it, thinking that meant that things were not going to be great from now on, which is not true. And then it's like working with them to make them feel like, well, deadlines and that kind of stuff, they're not useful for anything. A hard deadline, especially that in 12 months I'm going to achieve X, is really setting people up for failure. Not that you shouldn't have a goal, but I think the date should be flexible, and to say that it must happen by January 1st, 2024 is really setting people up for a potential negative experience. If they've set their sights on something, they've got their heart set on it, everything is set for that date, and then they don't get there.
I love that thought, because maybe I need to make that clear, because it is a 3-week program.
Yeah.
But do we expect everyone to change in those exact 3 weeks? Probably not.
Correct.
In fact, it might spur them on to positive things in the weeks, months afterwards, which is why we are following them up kind of along the way.
Well, so that'd be lovely to learn as well. So did it create a foundation for them and give them the boost in confidence? And then as a result of that, did they find their own path towards going to the gym, for example? Did they sign up to the gym, or did they meet a walking club, or what did they do that happened after that? Would be amazing information for you guys to discover after the initial exercise program was completed. So is this a multi-site study that's occurring?
That's right, yeah. So we have 2 sites at the moment, one in Sydney and one in Melbourne. As I said, we're running in Sydney literally right now, and then we start at the Melbourne site in the first week of August this year.
And how's the recruitment process going? Have you filled the numbers that you need for the study?
We have almost filled the study in Sydney. We are recruiting very well in Sydney. We still have places available for the Melbourne booster starting in August. So if anyone is listening from Melbourne, we are very interested in hearing from you if you think you might like to be involved in this research opportunity.
I'm very familiar with the Stroke Foundation. I've done a lot of the volunteering for them over the years. And although it's probably been since COVID that I've been not as active as I used to be,
Mm.
I was just curious about how they're involved with the program other than funding it. What happens when somebody says to you, here's some money, run your research program, and then what do they do? How do they sort of stay in the loop? Do they, I know the
Yeah,
Stroke Foundation wants to be in the loop because that's their key criteria, is to help people overcome a stroke and to support people with stroke deficits. How do they specifically get involved and stay involved?
look, they definitely are very supportive, and even with things like trying to notify the stroke community that this opportunity is available, they'll definitely work with us for that. But really, they give me the money to do the work, and then I'm accountable to show them, you know, what we were able to achieve and answer with the research. And I need to do that, and show them, hopefully, that they've got good value for money out of this project.
Well, they're going to learn something either way, and
We're going to
definitely,
learn, that's right.
yeah, it'll be good value. So, is there someone that you deal with in this space in the Stroke Foundation? Is there somebody that sits in a room that does this job with researchers that they've supplied with funding?
That's right, yeah. So they have a research office,
Yeah,
and very lovely people who support us along the journey once we do get the funding.
yeah, brilliant. So there's a whole community coming together to support this project, to find out one way or another some answers as to whether or not this particular what do we call it, high dose
Yeah.
program is going to have outcomes. And then those outcomes, do these studies then become other studies, or do they kind of pause and then some, what happens once you've completed your study, you've reported it, you've told people what the outcomes are? I imagine it gets hopefully published somewhere, your findings. Tell me about that phase of the program.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. So you want whatever we find, we want to make sure that that's out there for stroke researchers and clinicians. So we would try and publish the results. This is, you know, one of the steps, and I guess whether it goes anywhere after this depends what we find.
Uh-huh.
You know, what we need to know is that this bigger group of stroke survivors, you know, what do they think of this kind of training? Does this kind of training actually meet their needs or not? Do they participate in it? What does it do to the rest of their life? And then we'd really like to see a hint that this program is effective in improving their walking. So I guess until we know
The outcomes.
how successful it is, know the outcomes, we'll either it will perhaps stop there and we'll have to rethink, or if it is successful, we'll refine the program based on what we find and the stroke survivors' experiences, and then we'll try to, you know, investigate the program in an even bigger study to really know the effectiveness of this kind of program and to really understand how that effectiveness changes or tracks over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the criticisms of science based research projects is the amount of time it takes for the study to occur. I mean, it's all understandable, but this is kind of one of the criticisms that I've sort of become
Yeah.
aware of. The time that it takes to create the study, raise the money, do the study, report on the outcomes of the findings of the study, and then the applications of the study. What happens, say we have the outcome that we desire, positive outcome, people love it, and now you've got a tool that's proven scientifically to create better outcomes for stroke survivors in walking, and not tripping over. How does that become then applied into the physiotherapy field? is there a quick path to application, or how does that happen? What's the next stage like?
I love your idea. I love your positivity that we're going to find that it works. If it does work, the nice thing about this is it is it is a set program, and there are guidelines and resources already about how to conduct the program, because we're starting it next week in Sydney.
Nice.
So if we do find it's effective, the plan is to make all of those resources freely available to physiotherapists. So if they want to run the program, they can run it. I know it is, look, the time from research to clinical practice is long. The challenge is with something like this, where it is a real shift in clinical practice, it's a different way of doing something. It is hard to do that unless you have the research behind you. And we don't know that this is the right model yet. We do need to refine it with the research. I hope we're on to something, or at least on the right track. We're going to find out.
I think you are. Yeah. My instinct tells me that you are. My experience tells me that you are. My conversations with other stroke survivors who, quote unquote, fall through the gaps and then end up with a little physical therapy says that you're onto something. And specifically what that something is I think going to be positive, but how positive and what exactly data you get out of it, that's going to be the exciting part. To determine what the data actually says, as opposed to what, say, even if it's 10 very just very broad conversations that I've had about it with people, which are anecdotal but still positive, in that the more physical therapy they get, the better the outcome. And I just know that in that space, in the recovery from stroke space, if the people are not suffering with debilitating fatigue because of the deficits, and they are seeing that decrease of fatigue and the increase in sustainability of exercise and fitness level and all that kind of stuff, I just know that that's having a positive impact on the brain in every way, shape, or form. So I believe that you are going to get some amazing results out of it, and we'll learn a lot from it. And that's basically the reason why I thought, when you reach out and you say to me, can we promote this? I'm all for it. And I think we need to get as many people as possible in it, because that's what my community is telling me. They're telling me that that's where they're struggling to get resources. And if a physiotherapist in the local area gets access to the results of this study and then can implement it locally, that will be even better, because some of the challenges that stroke survivors face is accessing resources locally, and they need to go for a 1 hour travel every day, and that adds to the 3 hours and then 1 hour travel back, and then that becomes a real issue. So I like that. I like everything about this study. Hopefully my questions are reasonable, and
very. You've got great ideas, Bill. I mean, for me, the long-term dream is there's almost, I don't know where this place is you can go, but if you're a stroke survivor and you're saying, my walking, I'll use walking as an example. It could be anything. But let's say it's walking. My walking really needs a boost. There'd be a place to just self-select and go and do the program. I'd love it to be free, but
yeah, it won't be.
We'll work that out. Let's see that it works first. And if we can get like the duration and the dose and the right to suit stroke survivors, and we know that if they went for this boost, it would improve their walking, I just think that'd be great.
I think so.
And then imagine if in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whenever you needed it again, you could go and self-select again. That's kind of the idea. Could you have access to a short-term boost, but when you need it?
Yes. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about the recruitment process in Melbourne? What's the best way for people who are in Melbourne to get on board with this program or project?
So there's a trial phone number, and then there's an email address, which is my email address. So you can email me and let me know that you're interested. Typically, we'll send you some information or have a chat to you over the phone and just tell you a little bit more specifically about what's involved and what the commitment would be from you. And then there's absolutely no pressure. You get to think about it and see if it is something that you'd like to be involved with.
The location where this is all going to take place in Melbourne, do you know where that's located?
It is. So it's actually in Tarneet.
Okay.
And I say it that way because I think it's not, speaking to other researchers in Melbourne, it's not typical. It's not a typical research site. But I know that there are many stroke survivors in the west of Melbourne down to the Werribee, Geelong area.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that it's an attractive thing for people who are in the west of Melbourne. Though we definitely won't limit it. We have people who are coming rurally to see us for the program. And I think we might have one or two people that have agreed to cross Melbourne and come over to the west to be part of the research as well.
Fantastic. Well, that's good. Well, I really appreciate your reaching out and thank you for chatting to me about this project and program. I would love to know the outcome of the research when the time's right. And I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you so much, Bill. Really appreciate your time and positivity about the research, and I will definitely keep you updated with the results.
Well, thank you for joining me on today's episode. To learn more about my guests, including links to their social media and other pages, and to download a full transcript of the entire interview, please go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes. If you would like to support this podcast, the best way to do it is leave a 5-star review and a few words about what the show means to you on iTunes and Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, comment below the video. I really look forward to receiving comments, and I love responding to all people who comment on my videos. Like this episode, and to get notifications of future episodes, subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice. If you are a stroke survivor with a story to share about your experience, come and join me on the show. The interviews are not scripted. You do not have to plan for them. All you need to do to qualify is be a stroke survivor or care for someone who is a stroke survivor, or like Kate, work in a field that supports stroke survivors. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com/contact, fill out the contact form, and as soon as I receive your request, I will respond with more details on how you can choose a time that works for you and me to meet over Zoom. Thanks again for being here and listening. I really appreciate you. See you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy quality, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.